Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our April SEAC meeting. Thank you for joining us for our Special Education Advisory Committee meeting, monthly meeting where we focus on topics associated with the practice of special education in Montgomery County, and we look forward to a wonderful presentation this evening. My name is Philip Lynch, and I'm the Director of Special Education. I'm going to allow our interpreters to introduce themselves and to provide you with information about how to access interpretation services. Mr. Mejia, would you like to go first, please?
Bueno, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Estamos en nuestra reunión de SEAC. Nos vamos a enfocar ahora en explicar un poco los diferentes pasos de lo que es educación especial. Tenemos una estupenda presentación. Yo soy el señor Philip Lynch, soy el director del Departamento de Educación Especial para las escuelas del condado. Por favor, para los que quisieran interpretación al español, al pie de su pantalla van a encontrar el icono o la figura de un globo terrestre. Pueden apretarla y escoger la opción Spanish o español. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Mejia. We also this evening have Amharic interpretation. Mr. Beje, if you could please share that information.
እንዴት አመሻችሁ። ዛሬ እንግዲህ በሞንጎመሪ ካውንቲ ፐብሊክ ስኩልስ የልዩ ትምህርት አገልግሎትን በተመለከተ በሚደረገው ስብሰባ ስለተገኛችሁ እናመሰግናለን ያሉት። ስማቸው ፊሊፕ ሌንች ይባላል። ጥሩ የሆኑ ወረቀቶች ይቀርባሉ። አማርኛ ትርጉምን ለማግኘት እንዳጋጣሚ ሆኖ አማርኛ የሚል ዝርዝር ውስጥ የቋንቋ ዝርዝር ውስጥ ስለማይገኝ ቻይኒዝ የሚለውን በመምረጥ እዛ በመግባት አገልግሎቱን ማግኘት ትችላላችሁ። ስሜ አበበች ይባላል። እንግዲህ በትርጉም አብሬያችሁ አምሻለሁ።
Thank you to our interpreters. And if folks would like to join those services now, you can get started. I'm going to go over the agenda this evening, but before we do that, I want to introduce the co-chairs, our SEAC co-chairs, see if we have any public testimony this evening, then introduce our presenters, and we'll go ahead and get started. So co-chairs, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. I see Victoria in front of me there. So Victoria, you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Phil. Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending the meeting tonight. Thank you to all the presenters and MCPS staff for being here tonight. I am Victoria Yellow. I am one of the SEAC co-chairs, and I have a child in special education. She's in 5th grade now. I would also like to take a few minutes to just welcome new parents, if there are new parents, and of course welcome back other parents who are more veterans of the meetings. If you want to reach us, to the co-chairs, you can find our email addresses on the SEAC website. If you want to express any concerns, if you have questions, or even share stories, success stories, please feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you.
And I see Connie. Would you like to introduce yourself, Connie?
Sure thing. Thank you, Phil. Good evening, everybody. My name is Connie. I've been with attending SEAC since my son was 3 years old. I have a son with autism. He's on the Asperger's program, and I'm very happy to see all of you and welcome to new families. I put it on the chat, the SEAC website, and how to contact us. Thank you so much.
And Amy Bloom, is Amy with us this evening?
Yes, a few minutes late, sorry. Trying to get some bedtime prep done to help my husband out. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Bloom. It's really nice to see all of you again. I have 2 kids at Bethesda Elementary School, a 2nd grader and a 5th grader. Our 2nd grader gets inclusion special education support. And I think Victoria and Connie already reminded everyone to, please continue to reach out to us and please keep coming to the meetings. I think that's all I have right now. So Thank you.
Thank you, co-chairs. And I will share for those of you who are new to this meeting, we have a distribution list. Not sure how you came by this meeting if you were not on the distribution list, but if you're new and you would like to be on that distribution list, I'm going to ask Jennifer Strobel, my instructional specialist, to put her email in the chat. And if you would like to be added, you can email Ms. Strobel and we will add you to our distribution list. We do not abuse your email. We use it primarily to send out the reminders and agenda for this meeting. So if you'd like to be added to that list and you're new, please contact Jen Strobel. I'd also like to share that while we don't have public testimony this evening, it's important for us to remember that this is a public forum and it's a format by which you as our community are able to express concerns that you may have in the way in which we're providing services or any aspect of special education in Montgomery County. It's also a way that you may use the public testimony forum to share with us in a public way what we're doing well. And we certainly have had experiences with both, where parents have shared an experience that they've had that may be helpful for others or for us to work on as a school system, and may benefit all parents or students with disabilities in the county if we make changes or improvements in that area. So we do provide that opportunity. If in the future you would like to provide public testimony, we ask that you keep it within 3 to 4 minutes. And we also would prefer if you provide written testimony, a copy of that testimony to one of our co-chairs through their email. You can contact them through the SEAC webpage. Their emails are there, as they said earlier. Share that with them, let them know, and you could speak with them this evening if you'd like, later on through one of our breakout rooms if you would like to share a testimony in the future. We have one more SEAC meeting, which is our May meeting. I believe that's incredibly our last meeting, and that will be May 26th. It is pretty amazing that will be our last meeting of the year. That doesn't mean that I won't continue to, as director, work with the co-chairs. We are going to be working through the summer to talk about some things that we want to look forward to for the upcoming year. And they've just been amazing partners with us in this work. And so we'll continue the work, and then we'll put out the agenda for next year. But that May meeting is on the 26th. And for those of you, again, who are new, we meet every fourth Thursday, with a few exceptions from holidays and when our superintendent comes to visit us. So that is a little bit about SEAC. I know many of you are veterans of this format, so I won't go too much further down that road, but thank you for bearing with me on that. It's important for everybody to know how we provide this support and service to our community. At this point, I would like to just make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to go through the agenda. First, I want to congratulate our autism unit for putting on an incredible event last night. Amy Kropp and Dr. Mason, who could not be with us this evening, and myself, we were very proud to hand out awards to many of our teachers and paraeducators who provide support and services to students in our programs that support students on the autism spectrum. And it was our first annual award ceremony, but it was celebrating our 40th year providing autism services. And for those of you who may know a little bit about special education history, autism was not always one of the disability categories that was recognized under federal law. It wasn't until sometime later that it was recognized. And so, but we have provided services well before that it was listed as one of those disability categories by the federal government. And so 40 years, Montgomery County was progressive in providing those supports and services to students. And we have a tremendous array of services for students on the autism spectrum, and we're very proud of that. So it was a wonderful evening and an opportunity for those staff who support those services to be recognized. Amy, do you want to say anything about that that event?
No, I second, it was absolutely lovely to be there. Folks, it was recognizing a variety of para educators and teachers who were nominated by their peers. So nominated by their colleagues in their schools. And we saw principals come out to support all of their teachers in what's been a really challenging year for all of us. It was so nice to even recognize a group of new paraeducators and new teachers who started their careers in special education in this year of all years. So it was very nice to see it was really an uplifting time to be with them. So we look forward to the second annual next year.
And before I go through the agenda, one item that is not typically on the agenda, but we do like to give our friends from Montgomery County Recreation an opportunity to share any announcements that they have. And I think we have one of our friends here with us. So if you'd like to go ahead and share, who do we have with us from the rec department this evening?
Sharon, do you want to share anything?
What?
Well, there's some good information that she provided in the chat.
Yeah, so and did that get put in the chat, Jen, before while folks were in the meeting? That didn't get put in earlier? Does it need to get reposted?
I'll drop it in one more time.
That's great. So I can see, for example, that Montgomery County Rec is having a family pool party on Sunday, May 8th. That's a full and half day camp, and folks are registering for that now. So Jen will post that again if you can't see that. Okay. All right, so at this point, Derek, who helps us with our presentation, is going to put up the slide deck, and I will go through the agenda for the evening, and I will introduce our presenters. So we're going to start out by hearing from three wonderful presenters who have offered to share their expertise with you this evening. We're going to hear from Ms. Whitney Liverpool-Coomans, who is a special education teacher in the Child Find and Early Childhood Disabilities Unit. She is going to spend some time speaking to us about her expertise or understanding about the transition from pre-K to kindergarten. And this theme this evening is all about transitions, and so you'll see this theme throughout, looking at the different levels. We have with us Ms. Jocelyn Watson, who's a special education resource teacher at Tacoma Park Middle School, and she certainly has a wealth of experience. She's going to share her experience about the transition for students who are moving from elementary school to middle school. I've known Jocelyn for it's probably 20 years now, Jocelyn. So we go way back, and I know that she has some wonderful information to share. And we're also going to hear from Mrs. Angela Ackerson, a special education resource teacher at Roberto Clemente High School, who's going to talk to us a little about the transition from middle school to high school. Each presenter is going to spend about 20 minutes talking about what it will look like for your students and for you during that period of transition. And this is a topic that we try to hit at least once every couple of years, but I know that I presented on this topic many years ago, and I'm glad that we're coming back to it because we've heard from folks there's a need for us to spend a little time giving some information about this. So we'll hear from our presenters, and then after that, we'll follow the same format that we've been following the last few months, where we'll go into into some breakout rooms with the presenters. So if you want to hear from the presenters and go a little bit further in depth with them, have a little bit more of a conversation with them, ask some specific questions that you did not get a chance to ask during the period of time they're presenting. The breakout session, which will be 30 minutes long, will be an opportunity for you to do that. I will be in a separate breakout room for anybody who would like to to come visit me. It doesn't have to be about any specific agenda. I will just be there to answer any questions or to talk to you about any concerns that you may have and want to share with me personally. And then we'll have a separate breakout room for our co-chairs. They may rotate and be present there. Again, if you have any information that you want to share about the SEAC format or suggestions for the future, or you need to get any information from them, they will be present to you in that other breakout room. So that'll be our format this evening. And with that said, Derek, you could take us to the next slide. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and allow Ms. Whitney Liverpool-Cummins to go ahead and take it away and share her portion of the presentation with you. Go ahead, Whitney.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. So as said, my name is Whitney Liverpool-Cummins, and I am the pre-K inclusion coach out of the Office of Child Find Early Childhood Disabilities. This is above my head. While I am currently a special educator, I was also a general education kindergarten teacher and a general education first grade teacher. So I'm happy to talk to you about K transition. So we can go to the next slide. Yep. Okay. So just some brief facts. A child is eligible to start kindergarten this coming fall if they turn 5 on or before September 1st, 2022. Your address determines your child's home school. And there is a continuum of special education services available for kindergarten students with special needs. And these services are based on the types of specialized instruction and support your child will need at school. And the determination of these services occur during an IEP meeting. You can register for your child for kindergarten in person or online, and registration is currently open. And you will need a number of forms to register, including proof of residency, identification, your identification, birth documents, and health forms to register. And all of those things, the secretaries at your child's school could help you to find and pull together and filling out those forms. So let's talk about a typical kindergarten classroom. So a typical kindergarten classroom is 6 hours per day, 5 days a week. And yes, 6 hours per day, 5 days a week. The schedule includes a literacy block for math, literacy block, a math block, and specials, art, music, PE, things like that. And the typical classroom has about 18 to 25 children. As a kindergarten teacher, I personally had at the least, I had 16. At the most, I had 26. It just depends on the year. And students eat lunch in the cafeteria and go and participate in recess with their typical peers, regardless of whether or not they have a disability. So the curriculum for Montgomery County Elementary School is Benchmark Advanced for English Language, and Eureka is the math curriculum. And both curriculums align with Maryland state standards. If your student is currently in a pre-K special education program in MCPS, they are already familiar with these curriculums, as this is what we teach. And kindergarten students will have access to these curriculums daily in a literacy block and in a math block. Let's take a look at the schedule. So on the screen is a sample schedule of a general education classroom. Please note, I have indicated where a student in a homeschool model program may receive services from a special educator. It doesn't have to be there, but when I taught kindergarten, I co-taught with a special educator for reading, and I co-taught with a special educator for math. The amount of time and academic area is driven by the needs of the student and determined by the IEP. So please keep that in mind. And this is just a sample. Time and order vary based on the school. Some schools have earlier start times, later start times. When lunch and recess for kindergarten takes place depends on the school. Okay. So MCPS is committed to meeting the needs of all learners. Thus, there are other elementary school programs outside of the general education setting. And like the general education classroom, these programs also use Benchmark and Eureka Math, are 6 hours a day, and participate in specials. There's also an opportunity for students to participate in lunch and recess with typically developing peers. And so these are a few of our programs. We have an early learning center, LFI, school community-based, augmentative, and alternative communication classes and physical disability classes, like these programs. We can go on. So, the slide skipped. Okay, so we also have, so there are also opportunities for students to receive just like services in the general education setting, if they have a physical disability, if they need augmentative and alternative communication. Students with visual impairments and students that are deaf and hard of hearing can also receive services within the general education setting, and that will be determined. That is a team decision, an IEP team decision. We can move on. And then there are also programs. We also have programs for autism and students, social emotional special education services. We can go. Okay, so just some things to think about. These are not suggestions. These are suggestions for a few skills to work on with your child in preparation for kindergarten. These skills are not mandatory for a child to come into kindergarten having, but they're very useful. You know, in kindergarten, we spend a lot of time teaching routines and teaching many of these skills in order to support the independence of a student. Knowing, or at least being exposed to skills such as what's on the screen ahead of time, allows students to be more self-reliant and even a leader in the classroom. So practice opening snacks. So those chip bags, Ziploc bags, practice the pinching, buttoning and unzipping pants or a jacket so that they can be independent in getting dressed, using the bathroom independently, identifying their name in print, especially when they come in on that first day and they're trying to figure out where their cubby is. Knowing being able to identify their name really goes a long way. Putting on and off a coat and taking on and off a backpack, and then tying shoes are just a few skills that you can work on over the summer with your child in preparation for kindergarten. Thank you. And I will pass it on to Jocelyn.
All right. Hi, everyone. Nice to see your faces, well, some of your faces, and it's nice to be here to present this part. Derek, you could skip to the next two slides. I think they're kind of repetitive. So welcome to middle school. So I'll be talking about this great time in our children's lives. If you kind of read this quote, and we've all been in middle school, I think you guys can identify if you remember those times in your lives. Middle school is exactly what it sounds like. It's a mixed up mess of nothing and yet everything at the same time. So during these years, there's a lot of changes happening, a lot of physical changes. It's a lot of social emotional maturation going on. But it's also a time where students are kind of struggling with, some of those mental health needs, some of the social pressures. So it's a huge developmental milestone that the kids are going through. You can advance to the next slide. So a couple of things I just jotted down. I won't read all of these, but there are some significant differences when kids are coming from elementary school to middle school. One of the main things being that they usually have with 1 or 2 teachers in elementary school, whereas they may have up to 8 teachers when they go into middle school. There is no recess, where I think maybe in a couple of schools, they're trying to find some creative ways to provide some movement for the kids, but that's a big change. There are no teacher-led transitions in the hallways, so we're not, walking in a line following the teacher. Students are moving on their own between classes. There might be some more direct adult support in elementary school, where there is some increased autonomy and self-advocacy required in middle school. And a big thing that all middle schoolers look forward to is moving from the cubbies and their desks to the lockers. That's a big change. And then in lunch, sometimes in elementary school, you're sitting with your classes, whereas in middle school, you're kind of sitting in, maybe sitting with your peers, kind of having some choice. Next. This is your typical team when you go into a middle school. You'll have a case manager, you'll have a resource teacher for special education who is someone like me. And thank you, Ms. Frumkin, for kind of explaining what that is. A counselor, related service providers, if that's on the students' services for the IEP, subject area teachers, team leaders, grade level administrators. So there will be a 6th grade, a 7th grade, an 8th grade administrator, and obviously a principal. Next. So I'm just kind of reviewing what a typical middle school program, special education program would look like in all of our middle schools. All of our middle schools do have core subject areas that have inclusion models, which are either co-taught by a special education teacher or supported by a special education paraeducator. And core subjects are your math, science, your English, and your world studies. All students do have a PE class on their schedule. They'll have 3/4 of PE and 1 health class every year. And then they have opportunities to take electives. Those are some of those fun classes like art and music, band, some of those interest-based classes. And then there are specific intervention classes that are decided based on the student needs. One is a self-contained resource class, and another one is either a math or a reading intervention, which typically are in place of an elective on a student's schedule. Okay, next. So a resource class, which I mentioned on the last slide, is it's really an IEP service that will take place of one of your child's elective choices. And depending on your child's needs, they may receive some direct support with organization, maybe some extra time for some classwork, reteaching of some of the content, and then maybe some direct teaching of social skills. What it really is not is a independent study hall. So it really is kind of teacher-led. There are some focused lessons that are happening in those resource classes. And it really isn't like a homework club. It's not a time for kids to sit and work on homework. So articulation. So what that means is the period of time where we as a school team are kind of sharing information from the elementary school to the middle school. But it's also a good time for you as parents to start conversations with your child's current case manager and request a transition meeting if one hasn't already been scheduled. Most of us do have articulation meetings on the calendar with our articulating elementary schools. And it usually occurs in the spring of their fifth grade year, to determine, kind of what programs your child might attend or which services they will be receiving when they go into middle school. So a couple of things to think about over the summer, like a to-do list for you guys to think about. Reach out to you'll get a lot of communication from middle schools, but reach out to this middle school to see if there's summer orientation scheduled, make plans for your child to attend. There is a new student orientation that is held during the pre-service week. Make sure you figure out what date that is. You could always request a map of the school just to share with your child so that they can get some sort of orientation, on what the building would look like, get your supplies, preview the school website. Sometimes there's pictures, names of staff on there. Pick up a lock, because this is, the time when they're starting to use lockers. And practice kind of working through that. Just a little, one of those little bike locks or something like that, just so they can work on doing combinations. And then preview the student handbook so that they'll know like what the student expectations are, what the school rules are, what the school guidelines are going forward. Okay. Next. Be proactive with your communication. You can always reach out to your child's teachers. And once you know who the case manager is, feel free to share your child's strengths and your, just any opportunities that you think you would like to see for your child. All teachers do receive what's called an IEP at a glance at the beginning of the year, which is a summary of their IEP supports and services and their goals. Be an advocate for your child. If you do see something on a schedule that doesn't look right in terms of what we agreed to, reach out to the your child's case manager or counselor. Practice with your child on how to email teachers, maybe just even emailing you and just, getting into the habit of reaching out in that way. And then be responsive, like I know all the schools will start sending home communications via email, read those emails. And then as the year goes on, you'd want to get into the habit of checking your child's grades and posted assignments in the classrooms. One thing you can also start doing is once you get a copy of the schedule, make some extra copies so you can keep it at home, put one in their binders. If you do get a map of the school, you can map out some of that routing, how do you get from period 1 to period 3? What is your route going to look like? Find an organizational system that would work for your child. Some schools do have, protocols in terms of what they want students to carry throughout the building. It might be like a 3-ring binder. So you would probably find that out in the student handbook. Some schools do have an agenda book that they will give out to the students at the beginning of the year. You might want to get some extra supplies for either your locker or home. Get some locker accessories. That's a thing that all the students want to have, your mirrors and your decorations, and then find out from the school about your Chromebooks and what you need to do for that. Next. So outdoor education is it's a really exciting activity that all the 6th graders have an opportunity to do. Obviously, over the last few years, we either haven't had it or we've had a very modified version of outdoor education. But I'm hoping as we go forward and as things get more normalized, that they do have an opportunity to do outdoor ed the way that it's designed to be done. So it is 3 days. It's usually 2 nights at a outdoor educational facility. Ours is like the Smith Center. There's another location that's not coming to me right now, but you will also find out through your communication when you're scheduled to go and your child is scheduled to go. And at that time, you'll receive a packet. You would make all the necessary, arrangements for your child, whether it's medication, any kind of coordination you need to do for that. And then, try to build your child's independence because they're going to be staying away from you for those 2 nights. I know schools will reach out if parents are interested in chaperoning, and you would just figure out how to make sure that you are qualified to chaperone for that trip. So grading and parent conferences look a little bit different in middle school. In most middle school courses, there will be 2 grading categories. There will be a 90% all task and assessment category, and then a 10% practice and preparation, which is like your homework. They will start to calculate a GPA, which is your grade point average. And if you don't know what that is, that's defined there for you. And parent conferences are usually held at the end of first quarter, and the structure, depending on the school, might vary. But I've seen arena style where, parents are invited to meet with different teachers throughout the evening, or they might have a structured conference for specific students, and they would reach out to you in that way. Next. Homework, yeah, so there will be a lot more homework. Obviously, there's a lot more classes. It is important that your child does attempt homework at home because it is where that practice is built, just like in elementary schools. Most schools do have homework clubs available so that they can get some additional help to complete the work. Next. So the IEP process in middle school doesn't look any different except for the last few pieces. We will schedule an annual review when the due date does arrive. We do check-in meetings if there are any concerns, especially if they're not making the expected rate of progress. We are back at the table to look at the IEP, to revise anything that we need to revise in terms of the supports or the goals. If a child's triannual reevaluation does occur within their middle school years, we'll definitely hold those meetings. When they do turn 14 or within their 8th grade year, they are invited to participate in their IEP meetings, and there are some transition interviews that are happening for them just to get an idea of what their post-graduation goals are like. And then towards the end of their 8th grade year, like sort of like mid-May, we do hold transition meetings with the high school to determine what their next level of support will be. Next. All right, just a couple of things just to remember. Let your child, enjoy the summer. It is a big change that's coming going forward. I know that some schools do have summer programs that will happen. If that's something that you decide to do, I would, make sure that you do that. But you should know and you should be confident in the schools that your children are going into, that 6th grade transitions are supported pretty heavily by the school team. Those first few weeks, we know it's a big change for that group of students. There is a lot of support in terms of, how do they work their agenda? How do they look at their schedule? There's some grace, given to arriving late to class, because we understand that's a huge learning curve. And remember, our kids' well-being is, a priority. So listen to their concerns, address their concerns, but definitely advocate for their needs when you see that. And during this time, it is a really critical time to sort of, promote and encourage that independence to prepare for that next level of learning. And so one of the big ways to do that is really to push and support their self-advocacy. So one day middle school will end and become high school. And after that, it's just becomes life, and all those things that you think are important now won't be anymore. It's my favorite quote from my favorite books, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Thank you, and I'll move on to.
Before we hear from Angela, I just want to take a few of the questions that are in the chat. And I also want to remind folks, and some folks I know jumped in a little bit late. Number one, one thing, this is not a reminder. I failed to share that the meeting is being recorded. The session is being recorded, and we post these sessions on our SEAC webpage. So if you missed some aspect of the presentation earlier, you can check out that recording after it's posted on the SEAC webpage. We'll also, for those of you who missed the beginning, we'll have an opportunity for our presenters to respond to questions in a breakout room after the presentation. So you'll have an opportunity to come off mic and ask a question and have more of a discussion with the presenters. There's a couple of questions in the chat. One is a more general question that I'll refer to as a child find question. It's asking really about about how we manage monitoring students in terms of their progress, and whether teachers, what is the process for identifying students who may need additional support. And the way that works in the general education classroom is we use what we call a multi-tiered approach, where when a student is struggling in any area, whether that be a motor or sensory area, whether that be speech, whether that be an academic area, if it's a student who is currently not supported through an IEP or been identified with an IEP or with a disability, we put early interventions in place for those students to try to determine whether the student will respond to those interventions. If the earliest interventions are not fruitful and the student continues to lag below grade level, whatever that category is, the school team would invite the parents in for what we call an educational management team meeting. It's an EMT meeting for short, but it's a meeting really to maybe formalize those strategies that are going to be put in place, and to really document what those strategies are over a period of time, and make sure the parents are aware of what those strategies look like. And that might be a 4 to 6 week period where they're going to work on some specific strategies that might be targeting a certain area of skill set. And then that becomes a period of data collection for the team to see, is the student, does the student just need to learn the information or practice whatever the skill is in a different way, or with some different resources. It may not mean that the student has a disability, but needs a different type of instruction or needs a certain type of strategy. When a student is lagging behind their peers, it's not always an indicator that there's a presence of a disability. It may mean that they need the information provided differently or some other resources. If the student continues to struggle, the team would then recommend that we go to through the special education evaluation or eligibility process. So those are kind of the steps, those earliest interventions, that educational management team process, and then the eligibility process. And our teachers and special education staff who support students in those classrooms are trained to monitor progress for all students, whether they are students with disabilities or whether they're general education students. And teams are always looking at data for how students are performing to determine whether students are lagging behind their typical age appropriate peers. So that's kind of a general answer for that very broad question. Hopefully I summarized that. And again, some of the other questions I think were specific to scheduling, which I know Jocelyn has a lot of experience around that. Some of them around the middle school scheduling and electives, and what happens when a student needs to be in a resource class and to be in some other classes. How does that impact their overall schedule? So I think Jocelyn can answer some of those questions and give you some scenarios when we go into our breakout later on. She can respond to some of those questions. We do our best to try to confuse people, and I'm trying to be funny with that, but we use the word resource teacher because we also use the word resource to describe what is basically a department chair. So Jocelyn is a resource teacher for special education. That means she is essentially the department chair. And we also use that term for all of our different subject matter areas. So for example, you have a resource teacher for science, a resource teacher for social studies. So resource teacher in Montgomery County is a department chair, and that is unfortunately the same term that we use for a special educator who may be supporting students through a resource model. So that term unfortunately gets used twice, and we understand it can be confusing. So just know that sometimes it's a special educator who may be plugging in to a classroom or pulling students out into a resource classroom to support them, or maybe teaching a resource classroom, which could be for a middle schooler and a high schooler in the secondary level. That could be a specific subject where a student spends a portion of their time on their schedule. But just be careful because those two terms can be crossed up. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Angela. So we'll go back to the presentation, Derek, and we'll hear about our transition from middle to high school.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch, and thank you, everyone. My name is Angela Ackerson, and I am the resource teacher for special education at Roberto Clemente Middle School. I'm going to speak tonight about the transition to high school. Prior to my role at Roberto Clemente Middle School, I did spend a lot of time at Seneca Valley High School. I was a special education teacher, as well as a transition support teacher there. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I think that you'll find a theme with my slides that kind of a continuation. I think all of the transitions that we heard tonight from the wonderful presenters kind of go on to the transition to high school as well. I think the first thing to remember is time management. Students will be adjusting to a heavier workload. In addition to that, they'll have the opportunity to participate in some really amazing extracurricular activities. And additional social commitments, things like dances and sporting events and clubs and all kinds of fun things that they should try to be involved in and participate in. Okay, next slide, please. Remember to take advantage of summer programs. I think another presenter mentioned that as well. There are a lot of amazing summer opportunities. The Transition Support Services puts out a really great program for transitioning high school students. That's something to consider. Consider taking a tour, whether that's in person or virtually, and explore the school's website. There's a lot of great information out there on each school's website. Some of them even have virtual tours on there, which is great. Next slide, please. Remember to have a support system in place. All transitions are hard, right? So remember that. Consider your guidance counselor, case manager, transition support teacher, friends, relatives, students that are at the school now or former students, alumni can be very helpful. Next slide, please. And as I stated earlier, beginnings can be very difficult. And remember that it might take a few months for students to get connected, feel connected to their new school, their new environment. And also remember that 10th grade is a different year, 11th grade is a different year, 12th grade is a different year. And 9th grade might be hard, but they have a lot to look forward to. And finding ways to be part of that school community is so important and can help students feel connected. There are so many different clubs at each school, and anything that they can do to be part of that can really help. Next slide, please. Okay, I thought it was important to hear student voice. We always, it's great to hear these wonderful presenters that we have here today, but hearing from students who have gone through it, I think is really important. So I found this really great video clip that has students' voice, students speaking about the transition to high school. So we're gonna play that next. This is not from Montgomery County Public Schools, but it does have a pretty broad mix of different students that I think I'm hoping that we can connect to. So if we could play the video, please.
When I first started high school, I was really afraid of it being a lot harder than middle school.
The scariest part was grades matter a lot more.
I was afraid that the teachers would be real strict, but it's not really the case.
I thought the teachers were gonna be like really hard. It's actually more fun than middle school is.
I didn't really know what my friend group was gonna be, but then I realized that there's tons of different people and you can definitely find a place.
Not knowing my classes and where they were.
There's this new school, but it's huge.
Once you get to know the building, it's pretty easy. And also take advantage of the freshman orientation because that way they give you tours and you get to know the school better.
In middle school, you are dependent on a lot of things. In high school, you are on your own. And if you need help, you need to advocate for yourself.
Probably the work because it's harder.
The first time you take finals, every freshman freaks out because it's their first time, but once you're done with them, it's like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal.
People a lot older than you. It's really shocking seeing the people with the big old beards.
Maturity levels, and I don't know, maybe a bigger difference would probably be who your friends are.
There's a lot more people, which is a lot more variety of people, so you've got more groups.
The school year's gonna go by way faster, just because I think you're gonna have way more fun.
The friends, the activities, the cons, just feels more like a community.
Biggest challenge about high school probably would be dealing with the people around you because a lot of people are going through teenage hormones.
Fitting into a place, having a place where you know you can stay, having a second family. The biggest challenge is probably time management.
Juggling everything.
Work. There's a lot of work.
You want to have good grades and you want your parents to be proud that you can manage multiple things, like playing on a really good team in basketball and also keeping at least an A, B, C grade. And it is a challenge.
The freedom, you definitely have a lot more freedom than middle school and just a ton of kids, so a lot of friends.
The amount of people that you get to know and how many different things that go on.
I guess I feel like there's more community and there's more spirit and interaction.
It goes by so fast, it's really hard to tell what was their favorite thing about it. But sports is definitely up there.
Definitely just being independent.
You get a lot more freedom kind of to choose what you want to do with all the electives.
We can get here a half an hour early and go talk to a teacher if we need to.
Even though sometimes the classes are not easy, the teachers are really helpful and they actually do care.
They're a little bit more challenging and you have to work a little bit harder at it, but once you get into things, it's not that hard.
Higher level than what was expected.
There's a lot more hours spent studying and doing homework.
It kind of depends on your classes. If you take an AP class, you get a lot more homework, but if you have regular classes, the homework load is kind of regular.
I actually have a lot less homework in high school just because we have a little bit more time in class to work on it seems like, because the teachers don't give as long of lessons.
I have a calendar in my room that reminds me of certain events and things that need to be turned in. Yeah, I make a lot of lists. I just do period by period, what do I have to do?
Come home after school and the first thing I do would be my homework and make sure I get it done. And they give planners, which is really good because when I didn't use my planner, my grade was falling, but when I did, it started looking a lot better.
You know, keeping that mentality of what I'm looking forward to doing in life and who I want to be as a person, not the people around me.
Being on time, coming before school starts by sometimes an hour so I can talk to all my teachers.
I took AVID my freshman year, so that was a really helpful class to take.
I study at least 2-3 hours before a test because I want to be prepared.
Hard work, dedication. Not with just homework, but with every sport and stuff.
I've got some of the same ones. We occasionally talk sometimes, but we all kind of scattered.
Most of my friends in middle school went to a different school, so no.
A lot of the kids in middle school I don't really see because they're not in my classes, so I've made a lot of new friends.
It's confusing to find all your past classmates and all your friends because they're scattered everywhere. But then you start to figure out where everyone is and you start to know where you sit at lunch and where to meet up with people.
Some of them I've just met at lunch, and some of them are sophomores, juniors. It's not just freshmen.
I joined football during the summer and started making some new friends during weights.
Me being a shy person, it was just a little bit hard at first, but as I joined groups, I found a few people from there and just having classes with people.
And then after you meet those people, then you'll meet their friends, and then after you meet their friends, then you meet those people's friends. And so then it'll just keep building up, building up.
This is high school. It's supposed to be your better years according to what everyone says and whatnot. So be more more ready to be involved with things.
Don't be very shy because if you're shy, you don't really warm up to the school as fast. So then it just stays harder for a longer amount of time.
There are a lot of things I learned in my past that I could have used in the future, but I kind of threw them away because summer and all.
Take a lot of notes. Don't talk during class.
Probably just to trust the teachers. They know what they're doing. They have gone through this with students every year.
That there's gonna be a big change and you're just gonna have to get used to it, but it's not too bad.
Be chill.
Don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay. You'll figure it all out.
A lot of people told me not to freak out, but I still did it. But I would say I'd probably go back and just tell myself not to freak out because honestly, it's really not that scary once you get to freshman year.
Okay, and again, I chose to put that video in there because I really think hearing from students is a valuable resource. And I do think, sharing that video with upcoming students might be helpful too, for parents to do. A couple other things, important resources to note. I linked here the MCPS graduation requirements. For those students that are working towards a high school diploma, there are graduation requirements that's important to be aware of, and credit-bearing classes, of course, is a really big change from middle school to high school. Part of the role of the case manager, the school guidance counselor, and the transition support teacher will be to do credit reviews with your student and to kind of help them plan for what classes they need, what classes they have upcoming, what classes they didn't like, what classes they did like. And this resource, if we can just click on that, please, the graduation requirements, it gives you a good at a glance of what's required in MCPS for students on track to graduate. You'll see that they are required to take 4 credits of English class, 1 credit of fine art, a half credit of health education, 4 credits in math, and one of the new requirements is that they are required to take 1 math course each year. Physical education, 1 class, 1 credit, 3 credits for science, 3 credits for social studies, 1 credit in technology, and then electives. And again, this will be really your school guidance counselor, case manager, transition support teacher will really work through this, and this will be part of their planning. Student service learning hours, there are 75 that are required. When we go back to the slide previously, you'll see the link to the student service learning page that has a lot of really great information. And then the assessments that are required are also listed there. And again, I know that this is specific to students who are pursuing a high school diploma, and that doesn't apply to everyone maybe in here, but I also thought it was important to link and make sure that we talked about tonight. If we can go back to the next page, if we click on that, that is the student service learning hour page. We can click on that website there. This page is really helpful, has a lot of information. It has the form that you'll need to fill out. It also has a really great site with opportunities around the county for students to kind of explore and start thinking about. It also has a link to who the student service learning coordinators are at each school. That'll be helpful information. Just a lot of really good information on that page that's helpful. The link that has the opportunities is really cool because students can put in what they're interested in. So for example, if they really enjoy working with children, they can click that in the search bar and find opportunities there. It also has upcoming events that count towards student service learning hours, and students can choose to participate in those as well. So lots of great resources on that page. And then if we go back to the slide deck, transition services, that if we click on that, there is a ton of really great information here that's really specific to high school and post-secondary outcomes that's really helpful. Every MCPS high school has at least one transition support teacher at the school that will be really helpful to the planning of post-secondary outcomes, because really the goal of high school isn't ending at high school, right? It's whatever the student is going to do after high school and what that looks like. And the opportunities and supports that are provided through transition services for students is really amazing. And there's a lot of great resources here to start thinking about. And again, that'll be really involved in your students' IEP process and planning as they move up through high school. Okay, and I think that was my last slide there, those important resources. Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. And I thank you to all of our presenters. We are absolutely right on target in terms of our agenda time, so I appreciate that. And I think the video was a wonderful resource. It's great to hear from students. Somebody asked whether that was before the pandemic. I'm not sure when that was recorded, but it was great to see students' faces and hear their voices. And so thank you for including that. So at this point, what we'd like to do is have Derek give us some directions about how to move into the breakout rooms. Our presenters will be in one breakout room, and they will give you an opportunity to come off mic and to ask some questions. Please try to keep your questions general in nature. We don't want folks to share too much personal information about their student that may make others feel uncomfortable. We certainly know that you speak from your experience, and we have no problem with that, but try to keep your questions in a place where they're going to benefit all the participants if you can. And please try not to get too specific if you're speaking about a certain staff member or a specific person. Try not to use folks' individual names when you're asking questions. We really appreciate that. I will also be in a breakout room if folks want to join me. There's no specific agenda there. You're welcome to come speak with me about either the format of this evening's meeting or ask any specific questions. And then this third breakout room will be for the co-chairs. I do see the sign for the breakout rooms down at the bottom towards the right next to the interpretation tab. So if you want to take a few minutes to go into one of those rooms, we'll spend a half an hour, approximately about a half an hour in those rooms. I'll ask Derek to pull us back. You'll get a little bit of a warning a few minutes before 9 o'clock, so that I can share some closing remarks and say goodnight to everybody. So we will come back for a few minutes at the end. Okay. So at this time, go ahead and click on that breakout room button and choose your option.
If you would like any assistance in getting into a room, just put it in the chat, let us know.